what exactly is digital transformation and what does it mean for a winery?
Yeah, so it's overplayed like buzzwords around the world. I think people try, and I'm a anti-buzzword person to be honest with you, but digital transformation is really this notion of adapting your business to be using digital tools, essentially shovels, to scale and be more efficient, more effective.
Welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Barbara Fitzgerald. In this show, we'll break down the complexities of selling wine in the US by discussing the relevant issues of today with experts from around the globe. Each episode serves up 3 key insights to help elevate your winery's presence in the US market. So grab a pen and paper and let's pave the way for your success in the US. Hello and welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today I am thrilled to welcome Paul Mabray to the show. Paul has been a powerful change agent in the wine industry for over 20 years. He's been at the forefront of significant digital trends for the wine industry, working with wineshopper.com and wine.com when they entered the wine digital space. He's also responsible for introducing winery e-commerce with Inertia Beverage Group, which transformed into winedirect.com, pioneering their winery e-commerce, and also for introducing social media and social customer relationship management with vintake.com. He's currently the founder and CEO of Pix, the world's largest free wine discovery platform. And as one of the industry's foremost futurists and thought leaders, Paul focuses his experience on helping companies with digital transformation and strategies that build innovative wine companies. So, wow, that's really amazing, Paul. It's really great to have you here. I can't believe you have the time to come talk to us, but we're very grateful.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm excited. We're neighbors. I love that too. Just nearby. Yeah. We'll have to go
Yeah.
enjoy some of the sunshine before it goes away this year.
Before we dive into today's discussion, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to work in the wine business?
Yeah, it was an accident, actually. I went to college at UCLA, and my first boss was a gentleman named John Wright, who founded Domaine Chandon, and he needed a sales rep in LA. And I said, I need a job. I'm probably the worst salesman you'll ever meet on the planet, but I'm a nerd. So I wrote my own CRM program way back when, and it was very simple. It just told me who to call. And that's all sales is paying attention. You need to call. And so my sales went hockey sticked up. He promoted me too early. And I quickly realized that the career of being in wine was going to be much more invigorating than the career in film, because I had a bunch of buddies that were working in film and they were waiting tables and bussing. And meanwhile, I had a $2,000 a month expense account. I had free booze. I got to travel everywhere. It was a pretty cool little experience. So that's how I got into wine. And then it became a passion about changing the industry, originating in ego at first, like, oh, I want to be the next Mondavi being online. And then it came into and transformed into a passion about the people and my community, because I could see this giant wave of digital coming. And if we wouldn't adapt, we'd have almost an extinction level event of Darwinism occurring. And we needed to spread that so we could all succeed and carry this really amazing product that we have into the future.
Yeah, I love that. And also because the people of wine are so special, so unique. So helping, not just the product, but the people come into the future too.
Yeah, no, it's a magical industry in so many ways. I don't think any people realize that it's one of the few industries where you can actually call your competitor and you can say, hey, which wholesaler should I use in this market? Or my fermentation is stuck. Can you give me a hand? That's really rare.
Yeah, definitely. Rising tide lifts all ships for sure for us.
Thanks to Robert Mondavi. I mean, that was kind of his legacy. He went around sharing and making sure that we were a united community as opposed to competitive communities. So like European wineries used to have their house secrets of how they made wine. And Robert wanted to beat Europe and be better than the world. So he would say, these barrels work, this yeast works. This is how we should do viticulture. So I think he left that legacy across all New World wines and it's trickled into the rest of the wine industry as well as.
Yeah, the sharing of information. Well, our 3 key takeaways for today's masterclass and what we're excited to learn from Paul are, first, the macro changes impacting wineries and their digital adaptation strategies. Second, the analysis of online wine businesses, some of their successes, but also maybe some of their challenges and pitfalls. And third, the digital transformation process for wineries of all sizes. What are future trends and essential steps for success? Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot to
So let's start
cover.
really simple though with some definitions. So, what exactly is digital transformation and what does it mean for a winery?
Yeah, so it's overplayed like buzzwords around the world. I think people try, and I'm a anti-buzzword person to be honest with you, but digital transformation is really this notion of adapting your business to be using digital tools, essentially shovels to scale and be more efficient, more effective. But underlying it is the fundamental of this kind of almost like a scientific method of being, agile, change, and moving and learning all the time. So it's a continual learning adaptation process. So I think that's really hard for the wine industry more than most industries because we are not fast by nature. We are a slow annual moving crop that's very risk adverse, right? So as a culture, we don't do a lot of things that are really brave because there's too much risk associated with it. So, for example, if we lose that crop that year, we lose our whole profit. If we mess up on making the wine, we have one swing at the plate. Otherwise, it's done. Whereas if I mess up on a beer that I make, I can make more of it, or vodka. And then similarly, because of that, the marketing and operational risks we take are also very conservative, right? I don't have a lot of money to market because I only make a finite amount of wine for the majority. So my budget's pretty fixed. Even if I make a successful marketing campaign, I can't make more wine to make more marketing, which is a traditional kind of marketing fuel and engine. So again, every bet has to pay off to some degree in a way that we see it, or it has to feel like it pays off. How's that as well?
So, given that and given the significant changes that are afoot in the wine industry at the moment, what strategies have been most effective for wineries in adapting to these new kind of digital and market realities?
I don't think we're there still. And that's kind of a sad part of the story here. I mean, my whole lifetime, I remember standing on stage or talking to people, and I'll give you kind of a history lesson. When I started Inertia Beverage Group, which came Wine Direct in 2002, we were running around the valley, and I was like, God, there's this thing called the internet. We're going to be able to sell wine on it. And the wineries like, oh, Paul, you're so cute. Come back when that internet fad is done. And then 2009, I came running at them. I'm like, this social media thing is amazing. The customers all over the world are lighting up and telling us that they're drinking our wines. We've never seen anything like this where we can reach across time and space and talk to somebody about our wines. And oh, Paul, come back when this social media thing is all gone. Obviously, those trends have stayed with us. So I was, as terrible as we talk about COVID and, that black swan event, I was optimistic that it had forced us to change and adopt digital because that's all we did and grow into the category. In fact, the company I founded and everything I did was trying to leverage that moment in time. Unfortunately, we're experiencing a perfect storm of a lot of things. So once the world went back to normal, we kind of receded back to business as usual with wineries, but business was not as usual anymore. Many of the wineries that actually adapted digital transformation or maintained their spend and their energy in digital were incredibly successful. So Treasury has done an amazing job maintaining the pace of innovation on the digital level. And, Justin Nolan and Shem Schwartz are just amazing out there. If you've not talked to those guys yet, they're brilliant. And then little wineries that set up great digital infrastructure in order to allow them to do e-commerce and communicate are some of the most successful wineries right now. When we're hearing all these stories of failure and challenges, I know many wineries are just knocking it out of the ballpark by, having these systems tuned, and they're continuing to reinvest and adapt and learn and keep adjusting those things.
Would you care to mention some of the smaller wineries as an example for somebody doing it really well?
Yeah, let me think of a good one. So I think that, well, obviously, this one will not get me in too much trouble. So Donham, obviously, my wife runs Donham. She's doing an amazing job there. Not to pitch her winery, but they've really put together some good infrastructure, building up some good marketing automation. I think you'll see some pretty good changes at Pays You. Thanks to Miriam Che, she's leaned into that one and she's reorganized that and put together a pretty good process orientation. There's a few really star DTC consultants in the category, Michelle Egan being one of them, Miriam Che, and they're really driving some of this infrastructure support. And it's hard, by the way, as I've been volunteering time to wineries in my spare time. I give them my Sundays, and I can understand the challenges of digital transformation. It's, you're being very reactionary. One minute you're serving wine in the tasting room, the minute you're trying to rush back and do an email marketing campaign. and then you're answering the phone. So the context shifting is very hard. There's not a lot of vendors that make it easy to put those tools together, right? There's a lot of vendors that say they want the tools. It's just easy and simple, just tap into an API, but that's not a simple thing for a small winery of 5, 10 people to do.
So, what are maybe some of the tips that you have for a small winery to make that happen efficiently? I mean, do they need a consultant, or like, is there something they can do internally as well?
The process actually starts with themselves. I mean, they have to commit to change. And that's oftentimes one of the hardest things to do for them, the ability to go try and test new things and understand that they're going to fail forward. It's like introducing failure as part of the culture. Like I said, in a risk adverse culture is really hard to do. And I think that once you have the leadership and the team about that, then you start off really in a slow process. And functionally, what I've done and helped them with is you know, you inventory what you have, and then you start working on kind of three main buckets. The first one is, what is the foundational work that we need to develop that allows me to do the business work? Do I have a good email tool? What's my e-commerce engine, right? The second one is continual improvement. What systems am I doing? Can I start to optimize? And I can do those slowly over time. And the last one is the sugar rush, which is I want to do once a month a high ROI, high, return on investment, something that's going to give me that high and make me want to keep continuing to invest in the things that are really not pretty. They're kind of ugly, boring work, right? Process optimization is pretty boring work, right? And it is. It's like, setting up your marketing automation emails and getting through writing a customer journey. And all of these things are not fun work, by the way. They're just, some people love them, but most little wineries, it's a task that they don't know. They're learning, optimizing your fulfillment costs or how you're charging for fulfillment or all of these better segmentation of your customers. That's not fun work. Doing out a big campaign that gets you, $10,000 in return, that feels so. Like when you put those three buckets together, you can eat the elephant, right? One bite at a time that way. Yeah. Those are the three buckets we're choosing. And that's how you treat the process. And I think the fundamental thing is that people think digital as a project, and digital is not a project. It becomes a pillar of your business, right? It would be like saying, look, I cleaned the tasting room today. I'm not going to clean it for a year. A website and e-commerce is a living, breathing object where you're continually improving it, enhancing it, changing, adjusting. Social media is not just one tweet or one, Instagram post. It's a continual, you feeding the animal. And I think that's hard for people to understand, is that continual investment. Once you start the clock, it keeps going and you have to keep adjusting. And sometimes it's going to pay ROI or sometimes it's not. And often it's a fish model, which is you're going to lose money on it for a while before it hits that inflection point, and then it starts to pay dividends.
Yeah. Well, I have a question. So, you mentioned that in your history, people were like, oh, the internet, selling wine on the internet, what's that going to be? And that and so forth. But what are people now how are they pinching your cheek about AI?
Yeah. So AI comes up a lot. I just did a speech about AI. I think part of our problem with digital transformation is that we try to skip the basics and run to the new shiny object. I can't tell you how many people were talking about cryptocurrency or NFTs or, do you remember that app Clubhouse during COVID where you could go in? So I wrote an article. I'm like, guys, don't talk about Clubhouse. Just work on your e-commerce, work on the nuts and bolts stuff. And AI has a lot of promise. AI has been around a long time, by the way, and especially this stuff. What's made it different is the generative AI given as a consumer app versus a B2B app. And so that's really fascinating. And really, I fundamentally believe that we're not there yet with AI. I think AI has three key really functional uses. One is gives you a good head start, right? So if you want to say, hey, tell me how about the wineries to make the best Chardonnay, I want to write an article about it. It can give you some really good information to get you there, right? Or start the article for me. I'm going to go clean it up later. So it's a good tool for head starts. It's a great tool for reviewing your work. Hey, tell me what did I miss in this article? Tell me, read this website. Bring me the best points from this website, or, read this report and tell me the highlights. It does a really good job of reviewing work. And the last one, I think, which is a very funny statement, is good enough. What can it generate for me that's good enough? So, for example, can AI do an automated chatbot response that's good enough? It doesn't really matter that much. Probably yes. Can AI do, no one cares how the sausage looks when you make a website form that collects an email. AI can write a website form and make it work, right? It's good enough. Or many of the images now are getting more than good enough. The image generation, from the AI, which is good enough. A lot of content is disposable. I think people forget about that. And we chase perfection, which is a wine industry attribute because we like perfect wine. We want to make the perfect thing because we have one swing at the plate. Candidly, that email that you send out doesn't have to be perfect. It's got to be good enough that it converts, because it's going to be in the garbage can, the digital garbage basket, in an hour or in 2 hours, or it's people are living and dying by your last month's email. I can promise that, or your last month's social media post, right? It's what is good enough to keep that attention.
So you're saying more like some of these more automated emails that people might be incorporating into their digital transformation anyway, like that's a good place to use AI. But, if we're writing an in-depth research article about, some beautiful wine region in Italy, that's really left better to the humans.
That's right. Or even the head start. Hey, write it. And now I'm going to put the brand voice over it. So the polish actually comes from the human, but I've saved myself 40% of the time putting the nuts and bolts together, right? So it really is a time saver. And I think that people forget all of these are just shovels. I hate to say that, every digital tool is a shovel, whether it's an email tool, AI, e-commerce, and how you use the shovel is almost more important than the shovel.
Well, let's talk a little bit about online wine businesses, because obviously there's been a lot of successes and a lot of challenges there. So, can you share some insights into the key factors that contribute to these outcomes, and maybe a couple lessons to be learned?
Yeah, I think wine online is a very fascinating topic. It sounds so sexy, and believe me, I've been lured to the sirens call more times than anybody. I can tell you that. I think we forget that wine is an infrequent beverage at infrequent time from infrequent sellers. Meaning, like, I don't go and buy wine from the same place every day. Right? I'm in the supermarket today. I need some chicken and milk, and I need some wine for dinner. I'm going to have you over for dinner with your husband, with my wife, and I want something very special. So I'll go to the high-end wine store right down the street and buy something, a Lopez de Heredia or something beautiful, so we can crack that. Or, it's hard to find this wine. I have to buy it on the internet, and I'm going to wait a few days to get it, or it's only available via DTC through the winery. So because of that, it's hard to create a tool that's a selling tool where you're always buying from the same place over and over again, because the availability of wine and the substitution cost is all there. Meaning if I'm in the store and I don't have the wine exactly that I want, there's 100 other ones that I can probably buy that are good enough of a replacement for tonight's dinner. If I don't have the Lopez de Heredia at the fine wine store for you and I for dinner with our spouses, I'm sure there's another beautiful bottle of wine in that fine wine store for me to buy and still show well. That substitution cost, coupled with the infrequent purchasing behavior, makes an online site much more challenging than people think. And trying to find that usage tool, that thing that's going to create that recurring revenue or keep people coming back, is harder than people realize. And then wine, for the majority of the population, and I think this is something that we somehow get lost in, is we all become impassioned, enophiles. And then we think everyone thinks like us, and that everyone wants to experience wine like that. And even we as human beings, even us as enophiles, don't want to experience wine the same way. Like, some days I just come home and I want a cold glass of something wet with alcohol in it, right? It's been a long day, right? Other days I want an existential experience where I'm speaking to God through a glass. And then it's a variety of those things. And I think that that's the part that we've kind of lost track of. And I think the Come Over October movement is really interesting in the fact that we forgot that wine is about communal beverage. It's about, our job is not to deliver flavor profiles in a glass. Most people don't care. Our job is to deliver joy. Our job is to deliver community, right? So when we're opening a bottle of wine and sharing with people, that's a moment in time, and we're an occasion-based beverage, and we should lean into occasions, not in blackberry and cassis, or asking a consumer to be educated about wine, or even worse, denigrating other parts of the category that are actually bringing people to wine. And I think that that's something that we've really become terrible at, denigrating all the different parts of wine. And certain parts of wine are worse at it than others, but it's something that I think is harming us as a category.
Yeah, I agree. Like, we don't need to judge what we think the quality of somebody else's taste preferences are. If they're engaging in the category, that's a win for us.
Don't yuck their yum.
Yeah.
Don't yuck their yum. And I think what's really, we forgot about that. All of us as wine consumers, at one point in our time, it was red or white. Later, it was Chardonnay or Cabernet. And then some of us keep graduating up. And most people that came into the category, like this whole generational thing, I think is very funny, right? Where we talk about we need them to appreciate wine from a place, wine from land. Look, when you were 21, you weren't trying to understand wine from a place. You were drinking, whatever that alcohol was, and wine was one of the choices you had, and you grew into that evolution over time, right? You can name all of those gateway wines from other generations, whether it was, Sutter Home White Zinfandel to Kendall Jackson Chardonnay, these inexpensive wines, and
Chianti in a fiasco in the 60s.
all day long, Hardy Burgundy, or even Bartles and James, right? All of
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah, you're 100% right.
It's interesting because we all have the same goal, but sometimes maybe the way we're approaching it is kind of impeding the larger goal for everyone.
Yeah, I think that there's a sense of gatekeeping associated with that. Someone's become an impassioned wine expert, and all they can do is talk bad about the other wines because that shows their knowledge base. And look, I'll give you two great examples. So, growing up through my career in the early days, some of the biggest talk was not about younger generation, it was demographic shifts. How do we get more Hispanic Americans into the category? How do we get more African Americans into the category? Those were gigantic conversation pieces during my entry into the career. 19 Crimes has done more to bring African American wine drinkers than any other campaign in the history of wine. Stella Rosa, jalapeno.
Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
Stella Rosa is amazing with their connection to the Mexican community.
Amen. And we should be celebrating that, and I've been on stage a couple times and said, hey, who's ever drank 19 Crimes? And you should hear the statements that come from the crowd. Who would drink that big wine garbage? And you're like, that's the problem. You're the problem.
Yeah, we're all in the same industry. Like you said, at first we start those, they could shift someday to, one day it was red and then it was 19 Crimes and then it was something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more, thinking about, really specifically for Italian wineries, since they have a lot of challenges on top of the already existing challenges for like selling wine online to a US consumer. If you were consulting for, a small Italian winery, maybe they make 60,000 bottles. What advice would you give them to start their digital transformation or to make most out of digital transformation?
So look, at the end of the day, storytelling and accessibility are a universal trait, right? And I think that one of the things that digital provides beyond all other tools is it transcends time and space. I could be right now looking at an Italian website, reading the story about the Italian wines. And if they've told their story well, I'm in love with that piece. And if they've helped me find a way to access where their wines are purchased or purchase them directly or any of those things, or through social media to learn more about that winery and that their brand and what that means. And that could be anything from family to the variety to the land. Everyone has a story to tell, and the digital tools allow you to tell it asynchronously to when you're actually running business. They're telling it in their sleep. They're telling it when they're traveling. They're telling it when they're on vacation. So I think it's the fundamentals that are really real, which is how do I tell my story? What is my story, first of all? And then how do I get that into a digital form that lets people access it in the most easy, simple way?
And so authenticity is so important because your story is unique and we don't want to curate it to like, a Pinterest page. We want it to be right from the person, from the brand.
Yeah. I think authenticity is a really interesting word. I love that word for so many reasons, but I also think authenticity, to your point, it could be brand authentic and the brand is made up to be fun and silly and has nothing to do with an authentic wine family, right? It could be absurd on its own, or it could be all about just, I want to talk about the actual person that's made the wine for, my generations of ownership, or it could be just what the winery represents. There's so many things that are authentic. And I think a lot of people try to overplay authenticity as if it's just about telling that from that person. It's about what does your brand represent authentically.
Yeah, that's a great call out. It's not just, who's the family and speak in their voice, but how do people receive your brand, and how do you want people to receive your brand, but also how are they receiving your brand?
That's right. Like 19 Crimes authentic all day long with Snoop Dogg, in that piece, and I'm using that as a great example because it's so different, right, than everything else. And people find their own ways into the brands because once you put a brand out into the world, it becomes the people that consume it as much as yours, right?
Right. You guys share it. You're co-creating the success of the brand. So,
Exactly, 100%. And I think we forget that too, especially because luxury wine has its own thing where it tries to narrow cast what authenticity is, right? When you're going very high up to Petrus or Kistler or Harlan, that's a very managed image for a very small subset of the universe. And I think too many people think that same formula applies, across all wine.
right, right. Well, you've given us some fantastic insights already. So thank you again so much for that. As we wrap up now, we're going to take our rapid fire quiz where we ask all our guests 3 questions to help our listeners better understand the US market and specifically this episode. So answer in a couple sentences, please, if you can. Number 1, what is your number 1 tip for adopting digital technologies in wine and sales marketing?
My number 1 tip in adopting is read a lot. Read a lot and, find some experts that you listen to and learn from and just continue to read and learn. Digital is it's a forever changing object. The way that Facebook is operating to you and me right now is probably even different in our own experience. Or Google today is going to be different Google tomorrow. And that the only thing that's constant is change in digital.
Yes. And it happens fast, right?
Yes. Tell me about it. Yeah.
All right. Number 2, what is something you would have told your younger professional self about selling wine in the US?
I would have definitely told myself that it's very hard, that it's going to be very hard. And I would tell myself that it's also about relationships.
Back to the people. The people of wine are really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, what is your favorite travel hack when doing market work?
Wow, that's a great one. My favorite travel hack. That's a really good one. Protein bars are one for sure because, you're never eating. You're always on the run on that one. Here's one that I do. So whenever I travel for quite an extended period of time, so over 2 days, I write a note to my wife for every day that I'm gone, a letter. And so that she opens them up every day that I'm gone. So, there's the old saying, happy wife, happy life. So that way when I'm out and traveling. Yeah.
That is very sweet. A little marriage therapy here on the Italian Wine Podcast too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pro tip.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Masterclass US Wine Market. How can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me at Twitter at Threads at P Mabray, P-M-A-B-R-A-Y. And I'm pretty consistent on there. And then I've been writing on Substack a lot, which has been really a passion where I'm sharing a lot of the digital leaders in the world, but also analyzing all the online digital models just to kind of understand it so that everyone can understand. Those are my breadcrumbs to leave my legacy so that someone can conquer those challenging models and make a better wine experience online.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all of that you offer in general on this subject, but especially for your time with us here today. I hope to see you again very soon.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I love Italy. I love spending time there. And thank you for having me very much.
Awesome. All right. Take care. And that's a wrap for this episode of Masterclass US Wine Market. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest industry trends, remember to like, follow, and share our podcast. And if you find value in our conversations, please leave us a review to help others discover the show and grow our community. Stay tuned for new episodes every Monday. Until then, brindiamo il vostro successo.